Hello everybody, my name is David, and I'm going to do an instructional video on how to properly fletch an arrow, and why it's important to have proper arrow fletching is in order it enables the arrow to stabilize in flight. And it's kind of like when you throw a football and you throw in a spiral versus when somebody throws one of them flutter ducks and it's just flopping through the air. It doesn't travel well, and there's a lot of resistance and stuff like that, and so that in a nutshell, that's why we fletch arrows, is for flight stabilization. There's a million different ways to fletch arrows, and there's a million different arrows out there. Some of them are wood and fiberglass, aluminum. There's carbon fiber, and there's carbon fiber aluminum. Those are just a few that I can think of right off the top of my head. And before we start anything, as far as fletching, we need to choose, the correct bow for the archer, and that has to do with, one, what's the application? Are we going to be hunting? Are we going to sport shoot? A combination thereof. I mean, is the archer, how strong is the archer? All those things have to be figured out prior to even thinking about an arrow shaft. And the reason being is our arrow shaft spine is determined by how many pounds and the draw length of our shooter or our archer. So in my situation, and we'll just go off of that for a basic demonstration, is I'm a hunter. I do shoot a lot, so in a way I do it, I do it for sport too, just for going out in the back and plinking, but obviously I'd like to be prepared before I step foot in the woods, and my rule of thumb is at least 1,500 arrows downrange, and obviously that's shooting every day, and it adds up to about that before I feel and that's on the low end. I think that'd be a fair assessment that I shoot prior to stepping foot in the woods, and I think it's very important to be proficient. But nevertheless, let's move on, and I shoot. I'm going to show you some of the bows that I use, and I'm going to scroll around. I'm doing this kind of by myself, so bear with me. Alright, so right here, these are my bows. A couple of them that I shoot. The two on the right are for what I use. They're right now all set at about 65 pounds with a 28.5 inch draw length, and I'm running through my 65. I'm running. Originally it was set up at 72 pounds, and I have a 28.5 inch draw, so I was shooting a 340 spine arrow, which is fairly heavy, and that would be on the stiffer spine. So with that being said, we've got the bow figured out, step one. Step two, we got the spine figured out. Step three, we've got the length figured out. Step four, now we're moving on to figuring out how we want to fletch our arrows. And as you can see, if you look over here, here's some of the ones that I've done in the past. And these are just some of the, and I can even bring it closer just to give it a better. But these are just some of the ones that I've done, and I just kind of keep a pattern of things that I might like and maybe will use again. And then if you look here, these are like different wraps and stuff like that you can use, and it's just endless. I mean, and here's some of the, different blazers and the knocks, and the sky is the limit nowadays, and there's pretty much any way you can go about it. And here's some arrows to give you an idea of what they look like when they're done. And this is an aluminum carbon arrow. It actually has a carbon spine. Right here, this is a carbon aluminum arrow with an aluminum spine, and that has feathers, 4-inch feathers on it. This here has 2-inch blazers on it with a tiger wrap. This, I don't know what you'd call that, just more of a traditional wrap, I guess. Here's another demonstration of a carbon arrow with a 4-inch feather, and then just kind of a skull wrap. And these here are kind of like a shield type, 2.5 inch shield vanes. Here's a 2-inch feather, and they call this a shield as well. And then here's another carbon aluminum, and these are Easton ACCs. And they're used to use them primarily for competition, but they work well for hunting as as well. They're very accurate. And that's a 2-inch blazer with just a regular skull wrap, and then here's another 2-inch blazer. Just kind of some of the things you can do. It's got the flames on it, and then you can see it's got like I don't know, some kind of a ghost hunter or something. But we'll move on over to here. This is my fletching station. This is kind of where all the magic happens. I guess I can give you a little bit better close-up on my... Right there is Bitzenburg. I mounted it to a little piece of wood, and that's called a Bitzenburg fletching jig. And I'll show you how that works later. To do our wraps, I like to use a mouse pad. It works really well. So that's important too. And so before we begin, if you're going to have, let's say, so right now I'm refletching an arrow that had been damaged. And you can buy shafts, and then you can cut them down. And then what you would do is you go over here, and there's back here I have it's an arrow saw, and it's made for cutting your arrows and stuff like that. But that's a little outside of the spectrum of, I mean, that would be a step if you're going to build fresh, brand new shafts. So let's say I got a couple damaged arrows out here. So what you would do after we figured out what arrow we needed, we come out here, and let's say we already knew that and we had a damaged arrow. So you come out here and you use this tool right here, and then you would come over and you have to thoroughly clean the shaft. So you'd come out here and you'd scrape all this off, and you'd use this scraper, and you have to clean all that off and get it down to a bare shaft. And so that's kind of how that would work. That's the next step in the process. You'd come over here, and then we would take the arrow, and you have to thoroughly clean it. So let's just, for sake of time, I'll just pretend we clean this all off, and it looked just like this, because this is what you'd want it to look like. And so what you would do is, this one's got a little bit of soapy water. I'd come in here, and I'd use that end, and I would just clean it off just really, really well. And it takes a while. This is really on there. And then I would dip it in here, fresh water. I'd wipe it dry. And this is rubbing alcohol. That's the final step. I would stick it in there, wipe it dry. And when I did all that, it would look just like this, just perfectly clean. And then it'd be ready to fletch. So we'd go over here, where I already have one ready to go. And that arrow actually did look just like this one about 2 minutes ago, or prior to me starting the camera. And as you can see, after I did all that, I cleaned all that weight off of there, and now it's the way it should be. It's ready to go. So we're going to start fletching. We'll set that one up there for another time. I'm going to rotate this so I can see if I get in the action. And what we'll do is we'll start our wrap. So here's a wrap, and this is the one we're going to use. They come on sheets like this, and you can paint them on there too, but today we're going to use this sticker type. And you want to make sure your work area is very clean. It has to be clean, especially when you're doing these type of wraps. And for me, I am going to just peel these little buggers off of here. It's kind of a little bit of a pain. I'm going to set that right there. And we're going to get it just about to the knock before we roll. I'm going to move that out of the way, slide ourselves up, give it so we don't bump into something here. We're going to line it up just like that, slide it so we're touching, and then we're going to start putting pressure. Give it one last wipe there. Oh, I see we got a little piece of dust on there. Okay, there we go. We got that one rolled on there, and you can roll it either way. It depends on how you. It really doesn't have any effect. You can roll it so your seam is facing this way, or you can have your seam facing this way, and it's not going to affect your arrow flight at all. I don't know. I do it both ways. If you do it so the seam is facing this way, if you're a right-handed shooter, if you have your cock vane, which this is your cock vane, which would be your one that's your oddball. They call that the cock vane, and that has to be the reason that's different is so you know how to orient your arrow and your bow, and then as you progress in your shooting and you get to be a better shooter, you've got to tune your nocks. So you will make slight adjustments to your nocks, and on top of it, if you're using a drop away rest and other various types of rest, it has to be able to clear, and it has to be able to clear your cables too. So that's part of the reason you have a cock vane, is to help you orient it so you don't hit things as your arrow is leaving your bow. And I'd love to do more demonstrations on some of that. But this is the jig, and what we'll do is we'll start with our cock vane. And it's important, so I'm going to put mine right about there. I have a mark for my blazers that I like to use. And the reason being is because of these flames, that will put me just about above that. So I want to glue right about so I'm right about here. So I'm just above the flame, so I'm all on the white part here. And that, there's no real reason for that. I mean, there is a thing called FOC, and that's forward to center, and that's where you want to make sure your arrows are balanced correctly and things of that nature. But when we do it, we are going to, so you have that seam where the wrap ends, and what you want to do is put your cock vane so it glues right over the top of that seam, and it's super important you do that because it just helps, it makes it a little bit more secure, seals it all up. It's almost like when somebody shingles a roof. I'm having trouble seeing, the lighting in here is a little bad today. I think, yeah. Oh, where is it going here? Jeez. There's another reason that you can have it facing you, because then you can see it a lot better. You got to have a good fletching glue, and it's always good to have some paper towels on hand. Have everything ready to go when you start doing this. I use Fletch tight boning. I use all my vanes and stuff are boning, and they actually have like a primer that goes with their glue. So I just use the same products, and it makes it a lot. It's a heck of a seal. But anyways, so what we'll do, so we got that set to go. We're in the jig. You want to make sure this is right too. And there's offsets. Mine are going to be set at an offset. So we will take and put a little bit of glue, and you don't want to get carried away. You don't want glue all over the place. And I'm going to glue this right here. Just get it all right down the center there. And then we will place it down and hold it for a little bit. Just a hair. You don't have to hold it forever. You don't have to put the Gorilla Grip on it or anything. And I'm going to put your cap back on there. Because typically in these in glue or any type of adhesive like caulking or silicone and stuff like that, there's like some type of an acetone or whatnot that once it gets in the air, it starts to wick away and allow the adhesive or caulking to cure, which makes it, that's why it starts to get a little firmer when it's exposed to air. Is because of whatever that, like I say, like acetone or whatever. I can't think of the term right off the top of my head, but I will as soon as the video is over. That'll make me proud. But usually, to do this correctly, now we got to leave this. We should technically leave this here, each one of these, for 5 minutes. And it does make a difference. If you take it off too early, they won't, for whatever reason, they won't fully bond. I mean, even doing it for 2 minutes or whatever, but if you just go put it on, take the clamp off, spin it, they're really not going to set up, But since we don't have, all the time in the world, I am going to speed up the process a little bit here. And, if I have to redo the arrow, so be it. So we'll turn it now, and I'll put my next one in. And as we do our next ones, we want to make sure we line them up. So they're exactly in the same spot right here at the bottom as this is here, and you know, they all got to line up. You can't have one. Well, I mean, it isn't going to change that much, but it'll just look shoddy. And we will put a little glue in there. And this jig I'm using right now, it is a right hand helical jig. I'm using a slight offset. These veins are only 2 inches, so this is really not going to be, you know, you'll barely even notice. It's not going to be heavily exaggerated. But I do want a slight helical or an offset and or both. And I would use a helical even if I was using 4-inch feathers or 4-inch veins, which, while we're waiting here, I'll pull out. And this would be a vein. These are like plastic veins here. And that's what they call veins. And being that they're plastic, we call them veins. If there was a 4-inch feather, for instance, like this, we would just call it a 4-inch feather, you know. So that's kind of the terminology here. The name of these 2-inch little guys are a little bit higher but shorter profile. They call them blazers. I don't know who came up with that. It's probably boning, but nonetheless, that's some of the terminology that you would hear, or you'll have to think about if you're going to be doing this. And always make sure your glue tip stays clean. You know, you don't want to have, yeah, and here's some veins right here that are glued on. And here's another, you know, these are little pieces I use. And these are some veins. Some little flames, got my name on it. Probably can't see it. But I'm gonna just be very gentle there. I'm gonna roll this one. You always want to make sure you're careful when you're rolling it that it stops, because it has a little stop on it. So you can set this jig, you know, at different you know, so it'll stop at different places, and that'll orient your veins differently on your arrow shaft. And you would do that if you were going to use, you know, let's say 4 veins like that one, or 3, or you wanted to change something with your offset and you wanted to have, you know, I just stick with the traditional, so they're all spaced and staggered evenly. Jump the gun on that one a little bit. You want to make sure you have that figured out before you go to stick her down. But I just got her set up there. So we'll let that one sit for a few more seconds. And it's always good, you know, sometimes the knocks, because you have to move them, get a little stiff in there, so it's always good to have one of these little knock tools laying around. There's obviously different size knocks and stuff like that. What else would there be? No. Get that covered up. I guess as far as, you know, right and left helicals, it really doesn't matter. I know back in the day, right-handed shooters would use a left-handed helical, because if you were shooting, like, let's say a recurve with your finger, and the rest wasn't like a drop away or like the modern day type rest, and it was held against the frame of the bow, you would want the arrow as it's flying out to technically roll out of the bow, so it would roll away from the frame. And you know, if it would, I don't know, but that's what I've come to understand. But today, with technology and the bows and all that stuff the way it is, it really, you know, it doesn't matter. You can put either helical you want, and you'll just have to tune the arrows. And that's, you know, one of the things that I do, you know, it's tuning the bow more than anything, but you still got to tune your arrows. But how you tune the bow is this right here, and that's paper tuning. So that's one of the things you do. So when it tears, you shoot it through a piece of paper from about 6 feet away, and it'll tell you how you're shooting, you know, and I do all that stuff with my bows. I enjoy it. Shooting. I like to be accurate too. Okay, for the final step, what you'll want to do is you'll take it out of the jig and be very careful. We're not going to do it until it dries, and it takes about 24 hours for this to fully cure. But what I do when it's all cured and we're done is I go and I put a drop on each end of this vein right here at the very end, just a little bit of a drop right there, and that just gives it a little bit more integrity. It helps it hold up to the rigors of shooting. I mean, these things go through, I mean, just imagine, you know, that the average compound bow these days is shooting roughly 300 to 320 feet per second, you know, and you know, modern crossbows are in upwards of 350 feet per second. But yeah, so I guess the only thing I could add to it was, you know, for our supplies and materials you needed a fletching jig, a mouse pad. If you want to do wraps, now you don't have to do wraps on your arrows. I like to do it. It looks nice. It helps as far as when you go to refletch, as far as scraping the glue off, because the glue usually sticks to the wraps. You know, then you're going to need arrow wraps. You're going to need, you know, feathers, vanes, or blazers, some type of fletch. Arrow shafts and arrow saw if you're going to buy brand new shafts and cut them, or if you already have shafts that you're refletching, but at some point you're going to get into that level if you're doing this already. And then warnings, you know, I guess try to be careful not to get fletching adhesive anywhere other than where it belongs, and if you improperly fletch an arrow, it could severely affect the flight and the ability for the arrow to stabilize. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you for your time.